April 24th, Thursday, quarter after 10 a.m., Northwestern Arkansas, Bentonville. This is a video message to the future me, to the 2030 me, 5 years from now. This is a message from me to me. This is a video message to the future me. So, future me, 2030 me. Do you remember several years back, a few years back, when you wrote a note to yourself? That was in 2019. You wrote a note to yourself and you didn't find it again until the end of 2021. Do you remember how impacting that was? Do you remember how you had that revelation? It's like it hit you so profoundly that just that little note, what was it? Just two paragraphs. Just two paragraphs. You didn't know when you would find it. It was just a little note that you hid in one of the many, many books you had at the time. And you found it 3 years later. You forgot you even wrote it to yourself. But do you remember how it hit you so hard? How it hit you in such a profound way to where you were just awestruck and just reading that, to where you actually thank yourself for the work you're doing and who you are and the struggles you've gone through and what you've probably become and what you're probably seeing. In 2030 me, do you remember how you felt that day, how you were sitting there reading that, holding that letter, and you were like, oh my God, I actually do love me. I actually do care for myself. I actually do care. That was the it was such a profound feeling or thought to think. To go all those years and realize you never cared for yourself. Never cared for yourself, and never liked yourself. And then that note proved otherwise. It was a little glimmer of hope that showed that you actually do like yourself, that you actually do like you. So anyways, 2030 me, from the time you took that pen and paper, from that time you made a full decision, at the end of 2017, after all the elders died of the family and all the false constructs of blocking ego, of just being arrogant, prideful, to shield yourself from the realities of the dark areas you couldn't see and didn't realize you were doing that. And all the bad habits of alcoholism, drug addictions of various types, the crutches, the mindsets that your mind had twisted into and became shaped as throughout the years from childhood. All the work you've done so far in between these past 6 years, from like 2019, it's 2025 right now. We're into the second quarter of 2025 right now. I want to thank you, 2030 me, for everything that you've surmounted psychologically. Because at the end of the day, it's all about psychology. It's all about perception. It's all about the emotions. It's all about the human program. It's all about the human DNA. It's all about the previous generation. It's all about the next generations. It's all about this generation. 2030 me, at this point of 2025, right here, right now, you have literally reconstructed yourself in such a way to where you are damn near not nothing of what you used to be. Almost, not quite. But 2030 me, I'm sure right now you're sitting in probably a very large size townhouse or country house, a mansion, and I'm sure you've got well more than $27 million in your bank account. And I'm sure you have become somebody you could have never imagined you could be in your wildest dreams. And the lives you've touched, and the papers you've written on the human psyche, and the manners you did it. But it's the way you brought it to the world. 2030 me, in the future. As you sit here and look at this video right now, you look at this Timothy Daniel Wilson right here that's drinking this mushroom coffee, and then the Timothy Daniel Wilson who's drinking whatever kind of morning thing or whatever you happen to be drinking. While you watch this video, you realize that you had genius before you knew you had genius. And I'm not sure what that's going to be. 2030 me, you're going to know. And you're going to be sitting there right now looking at this video. And it's probably going to make you emotional because you're going to be like, that is so cool that you made this video for me 5 years ahead of time. And now I'm listening to it. Okay, here's a little hint of the genius that I know that will manifest without a shadow of a doubt, somehow, some way. Here's the one genius. You remember back in way back, by the time it's 2030, that would be right at the 10-year mark, or 11. No, it would be at the 11-year mark, maybe a smidge over. Do you remember when there was a couple of things that hit you that night when you was out there in that shack at Decatur, Arkansas? When you was at the end of a pretty heavy doping and alcohol run, and you had no friends, you didn't even have a bicycle to ride. You were basically a feral stray animal. You was out there in that old church shack thing outside of Decatur on a mattress on the floor. No friends. The only family you had to come around to check on you was your oldest daughter and your granddaughter. Remember that? Remember those night terrors you were having? Remember those days? You remember how hateful it was? It was like you felt nothing. It was like there was just nothing but just hate coming to the surface. It was just all hate, and you were stuck that way. You remember those night terrors you used to have when you'd be like asleep in there in that room, and you'd have that door shut and you had that little lock on it. And you'd have this dream. It sounded like somebody come walking through that floor through the back door. It'd be like, sound like a really big band. It sounded like boom, 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 boom. Then they'd come to the door and there'd be a moment of silence. And then it'd be like bam, bam, bam. And it sounded like they were trying to bust that door down. But yet inside yourself, you remember, it's like you were trying to wake up, and it was like you were fully conscious inside your body, and you were like trying to make yourself get up out of bed, and you couldn't do it. And it's like your body wouldn't wake up, and you were inside, you were like yelling to yourself. It's like, wake up, wake up. It's like, wake up, they're going to come in and freaking kill you. And you're like trying to wake up, and you couldn't. And then finally you'd wake up, and then you'd jump up, hit the light, pop that door open, and come flying out like you're going to start fighting like some psycho, and there's no one there. And then you would jump up and you run through that little old church shack, whatever it was. You'd go look at that back room door. The lock is still on that. You run to that other door on the other side. Look at that door. It's still locked. You look at all the windows. None of the windows are open. All the windows are still locked. And you would think, oh my God, it was just a freaking nightmare. And it was just so vivid and so terrifying. You remember those night terrors? You remember how that went on for about a week, 2 weeks, something like that? And it was like, and it was almost like driving you insane. You remember that? Do you remember that, Timothy Daniel Wilson? Do you remember how you did not know whether if it was actual paranormal activity or if it was just your subconscious facilities trying to connect with your conscious facilities to reconnect your heart, mind, body, and soul? And do you remember how you were so devastated? You were so devastated. It's like something clicked. It's like your uncles would died. Let's say your one of your favorite mentors had died. Your favorite mentor of your Alcoholics Anonymous buddy, the old guy, died. The person you thought was the only person you could talk to died. All your uncles died. Well, except for Uncle Daryl, of course. But anyways, on the Cherokee side, all your uncles died, and then your dad died. And it's like you were standing there. You just broke up with your relationship with the girlfriend you had of 3 years. Very toxic relationship. Remember all that? Do you remember how you were right there? You were right there. The failures, all the way from childhood of 3 and 4 years old and 5 years old, all the way through those years of your childhood failures, through your teenage failures, to your 20s failures, to your 30s failures, and then finally into your 40s failures. Do you remember how intense that day was, where you was stomping around like a psycho? And you were like cussing God. You were cussing God, trying to get a charge out of God or something. But do you remember how you were just stomping around? And you was like practically doing like figure eights in that room in there, and you were like repeating something over and over and over. So hateful. You were like, "Oh, I'm so glad everything always just works out so perfect for me," and you just kept like saying that over and over and over. And then you fell asleep that night. You remember that psychoness, stomping around like that, so like some kind of psycho blithering idiot? Do you remember those days, Timothy Daniel Wilson? Do you remember that night, that very night? It was approximately September 15th, 2017. Do you remember that? And do you remember that night when you fell asleep? You were still mocking God with that one sentence. You were saying, "Oh, thank God, everything always works out better for me than I thought it would." And I do believe that's the actual words you were saying. And you were saying that over and over. And you passed out that night, saying that, like some kind of psycho, laying there in that old busted church shack farmhouse thing out there in the middle of the field on the back 40 of that chicken farm of Milliken Farms. Remember that? But you remember that next day. You remember that next day waking up and you didn't have that night terror. That night terror wasn't going on where it sounded like somebody was coming in there banging on that door, and you wasn't having any other crazy nightmares where the night terrors come. You wasn't having none of those dreams. You remember those dreams, the night terrors? Of course you do. How could you forget that? That's been a reoccurring dream that's dotted here and there throughout your life. You know, the night terrors. They look like humans. They don't punch and kick. They don't even talk. But it's like their hands are so strong. If they get their hands on you, they will literally rip meat off you. They will tear you apart. Hence, terrors. Remember those nightmares? It's like the only thing you can do in those dreams is knock them off their balance and do everything you can not to let them get their hands fully on you, because they'll tear you apart. And run away as fast as you can, as far as you can. Remember those dreams? 2030 me, 2030 Timothy Daniel Wilson. I am proud of you. Assuming you're still alive, I am so proud of you for what you've done. You have found a genius in you that is extremely valuable, that the world needs It's in the way you share stuff. I mean, it's an intrinsic value that we all have, but I'm just thanking you from your point of view, from your life, from the you, from the intrinsic you. That's like you can have 1,000 people tell one person something, and at the workplace or wherever, and you can be like, oh, everybody's already told this person this, and this, and tried to teach them on that and that, and then someone comes along and they say it in a certain way with just even a very small handful of words, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 words, and it's like clicks, and then that person turns into better than any of the other people that were trying to teach them at it. That kind of genius. 2030, Tim, I thank you for surmounting these problems, and I thank you so much for keeping records all these years. You were just greatly loved and appreciated, Timothy Daniel Wilson, for the data you have kept on your tragedy and triumph. The journals you keep, the stories you write, the little snippets and notes you keep like they're just diamonds and gold. Because they are. Because they really are. You know that weird little thing you do where you'll have like a little note, a little piece of paper where an idea popped out, and you have that piece of paper, and it doesn't really have an exact folder or category it goes in, but every periodically you look at it and you'll switch it from this folder to that folder to that folder, because for some odd reason, you get this intuition that it was sent from the spirit of the universe or an otherworldly type thing to be manifest into the physical realm of planet Earth to help humanity somehow. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much, Timothy Daniel Wilson, 2030 Tim. Thank you so much for looking at the things as very, very important that everybody looked at as whatever, dude. Thank you so much for never losing motivation, putting one foot in front of the other. 2030 me, look at what you've created. Look at the 2025 me as I sit here. I sit here in this apartment. I've learned a great deal of things from 2017 to 2025 now about the United States Patent and Trade Office and copyright and the legalities of things like that, and writing and self-publishing and the sharky world that is, and the sharky world that product development is out there, and just the sharky world that it all is. It's like you've learned so much about the ignorance tax that everyone must pay to cross the threshold. That's the dragon everyone must face. I don't care if you were born rich, you come out of poorness. Thank you, Timothy, for walking straight through the gate. And thank you for developing that system that you sat down and wrote specifically at the end of 2018 in the first quarter, second quarter, whenever that was, when you sat down specifically and you wrote that list of like 100 items of what you wanted to attain by 2025. I'm sitting here to tell you, of course, basically none of that happened, and you realize how none of it, you really didn't want any way, and it was all just ridiculous, just stuff, nice stuff, yeah, and whatever, but that one thing. Okay, 2 things. There's 2 things. One is to develop a system, because the stories that you'd seen so far at that point, even though they were minimum, the little bit of studying, the few months of studying that you did already on rich people and the problems they have, their internal and external, about handling money and how to set a system to be able to not be poisoned by riches, to not be poisoned by ego. and to be able to handle it right and properly. Thank you so much for developing that system. Remember 2030 me. Remember in 2030 me, the revelations you've had about subconscious criteria, subconscious beliefs, and subconscious function, the things that you thought were theory, that you thought you were seeing, but you really didn't find any good research material to expound on it from, throughout 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, that started popping up in 24 and 25, has turned out to be absolutely real, to be factual, very factual, because it's the manner, 2030 me, it's the manner, the lens that you had people look at it through, not the subject itself. And the reason it wasn't, and what made it so difficult, 2030 me, is that a subconscious function. See, our subconscious function, it's the same as what you thought it was in 2000, at the end of 2018 and 2019, when you went ahead and started writing to try to self-publish some books on what you thought was real, but you wasn't sure if it was real, and you couldn't prove that it was real. 2030 me, I'm telling you from 2025 me, that in the entire year of 2023 to 24 and 2024 to 25, the sobriety that you have acquired in the psychological facilities, you have healed and reconstructed so far with the program of AA and everything else that you do. I'm just saying, from 2025 me, thank you so much, 2030 me. And by now, the things that, everything inside your body, as in your mind and your feelings that we're saying, I'll just sweep it away, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away. Something deep down inside you said, no, keep that, keep it, keep it. Keep it. Keep those notes. Keep it. Keep it. It's a couple of sentences. Keep it. It's a couple of words. Keep it. And you kept it. And now 2030 me, I have no idea what it is in 2030 me, but I'm sitting here right now to thank you so much. 2030 Timothy Daniel Wilson, thank you so much for keeping those things, because what they are now in 2030 is only what your deep down intuition, deep down in the pit of your gut, you knew for a fact. Those little snippets and tidbits of pieces of paper you write on that you keep, those are seeds, and you know it. And you know, so many things grow from seeds, so many things grow from spores. And what are those things? Those things are so small. Spores are like microscopic things, but yet they can grow up into something so awesome. And you knew that. You knew it deep down. And by now, you probably went back to writing on the novel, which is something you really didn't want, you really haven't, that you really wanted to do, that you started in 2020. Remember that? When you wrote in your notes that 2025, you wanted to begin writing the Spirit of the Clan. And the notes you had for the Spirit of the Clan and the theme of the Spirit of the Clan that you wanted to write. And when you wrote out that, you assumed by 2025 that you would be financially fit enough, maybe not the $27.9 million mark that you had marked out to have in 2029, which you don't have at this moment in 2025, me. You marked out, you was going to do that. You was going to get a cabin somewhere, go off by yourself, preferably Guatemala, live in a little cabin near some village, preferably by Atitlan or one of those lakes around there, and Write the Spirit of the Clan, whether it took a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, till you die, whatever. I want to thank you, 2030 me. Wherever you're at in that Spirit of the Clan, whether you finished that novel or whether you're still writing that novel. I'm curious in 2020, the 2025 me, as I sit right here, I wonder, did you leave the title the same? Spirit of the Clan? Not the greatest love story ever told, but the only love story ever told? That one? You keep the title the same. But anyways, 2030 me, thank you so much for the things you share. Thank you for figuring out how, or at least getting a good idea how Sam Walton was wildly successful with people. And maybe not following his path and following his systems and methods. I don't think none of us should do that. You know that 2030 me. You know that better than anyone. And as I sit here, 2025 me, I know not to just follow someone's so-called exact path. Maybe get some little pointers or ideas here and there, but no. 2030 me. I'm proud of you, brother. I'm very proud of you. Now, whether you achieved that one real estate thing, I'm not going to say it on this video because I'm putting this video actually up on YouTube, but 2030 me, by about this time, 2030, maybe 2027, something like that, that one real estate staple, that crazy off-the-wall dream, that dream that kept waking you up at night about the real estate in Florida, real estate in Guatemala, the real estate in North America. That dream, you know, how could you forget? You can't forget that. You have those kind of off-the-wall dreams and they wake you up. And you wake up from a dead sleep in the middle of the night and you sit straight up and it's as if you wasn't even never asleep. That 2030 me, whatever that is, it turned out to be. Thanks a million for fleshing that out, for helping the spirit of the universe to come alive through the perception of the human mind, to be shaped as the belief and perception that the spirit of the universe was trying to accomplish. You helped it take the shape and form it wanted. 2030 me, thank you so much for doing that. Because you know what? If you got some off-the-wall dream to where even the greatest professionals and the people that are top dogs in their field, and if you kind of talk to them about certain things and you know, if you don't tell them directly what you want to talk about, but you talk about kind of in that direction and you already see what kind of muck you're getting, stepping in, what kind of subconscious guards they got pinned in to where they can't even see it. Thank you so much for still trudging forward. Thank you so much for doing that. But the greatest thing I want to thank you for right now, Timothy Daniel Wilson, is making this one choice. Do you remember September 15th, 2018? All that craziness out there in that shack where you had fully lost your heart, mind, body, and soul. It was over. You were just so sickly, toxic. Your teeth are all busted out, fucking ugly. I mean, bodily functions not working worth of shit. I mean, just sick. Coming off freaking pain pills, crystal meth, alcohol, 30-something years of smoking cigarettes like a freight train every day. Not to mention all the psychological toxic shit that made you sick. You remember that day, that fire, when you got a pen and paper and you was talking out loud like a psycho to yourself, and you said, right here, right now, I need to either fully choose to live and figure out how to do that, or I need to fully choose to die and figure out how to do that and get them done immediately. Whichever one I choose, which one am I going to choose? And I remember wrestling with that thought all day. Seems like a person that has any mind whatsoever would be able to be like, duh, choose life. No, you remember that? It took you like that whole freaking day, that whole night to decide whether you wanted to live or not. But you remember that power that came in? It's like everything just freaking did a flip. For the first time in your entire life, you made a decision and you chose life. You remember that? And you fully got it in your head and worked that in your head. I can't remember if it was a couple of days or whatever. It's kind of blur. It's always such a blur coming off of dope and everything. But anyways, do you remember 2030 me? You remember that back in 2018, September 15th? You remember that day? That day. That was the very day. You didn't even have to mark that day down. It was so monumental. You didn't even have to mark that on your calendar. That 15th of September. When you decided, I either need to fully commit to dying and make that shit happen, or fully commit to living and make that shit happen. And you chose life. And do you remember that whole next week? You spent like that whole next week or so scratching out on a piece of paper, just a pen and pad, just plain Jane paper, plain Jane pen, just marking out targets to shoot for and putting timelines on it. Remember all those crazy timelines you put on that stuff? All that ridiculous stuff. Freaking $30,000 Gibson guitar just because it's like a 1955 edition and stuff like that. There's not many of those floating around. And by 2030, there's still not many of those. But it's like you wanted one of those just because you love Gibson and their Jumbo Series guitars. But anyways, just all kinds of off the wall stuff like that. You remember the Lamborghini you had marked out for 2024. You don't give yourself much time. But do you remember 2030 me? 2030 me. Do you remember when you the very first thing you marked out on that list was $27.9 million. Remember how you kept scratching out numbers and it was trying to figure out which one at the time? Interest rates in all these banks around here in the four-state area, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, all the banks around here, they didn't have shit for interest, but it was like he was trying to figure out how much interest you could get, how much money it would take to make to where you could live off the interest alone. And what was it? I can't remember if it was $150,000 or $200,000 a year off of that. Or it might have been even $100,000 a year off of that, or a little more. And that's the number you chose, $27.9 million. And you remember how you marked it out for 2030, actually. You gave yourself like 12 years or something. And then like a couple, 3 or 4 months later, you marked it down to like 2028 or 27. And then like, I think it was like a year later, you marked it down to 2025. 2030 me, it is 2025 right now, and it doesn't really look like you're going to have $27.9 million in your bank account by the end of this year. But you know what? It's the psychology of the money. It's the can do. It's the ability to see that it can be done. It's the ability to see that what's blocking you is subconscious beliefs and criteria in myself and others. 2030 me, it's still the same. It is still the same. In 2030 me, the crazy revelation that you had in 2023, 24, and 25, these past 2 years and more of right here, right now. We're up into the third year, coming into the third year of the release of ChatGPT. You remember what you were thinking about back in 2023, 24, 2030 me. Do you remember what you were thinking you were saying of the human evolution? Humanity's evolution. You remember that? 2030 me. Honestly, from 2025 me, I don't know if that's going to flesh out. But if it didn't flesh out, I'm sure you're seeing some super awesome things through that lens that other people aren't seeing. And if it did happen, I'm still sure you're seeing things that other people are not seeing through that lens. But 2030 me, your ability to write. And it's that inspiration, that spark that kicked in back in. You remember how you got a piece of paper? Yeah, I think it was at the end of 2019 or maybe in 2020. You wrote out, it's like that snap that you had September 15th, 2018, that snap when you decided to fully live instead of fully committing to dying and killing yourself, because that's what it would have been. Remember that theory. Once you realized and you look back after you was like a year and a half or 2 years into it, and you realized it's like something is pulling me. Day by day, something is pulling me. I don't have to push myself. I don't have to motivate myself. Something is pulling me. What is it that's pulling me? Even when I fall, it's still pulling me. It's like back up on your feet and start walking. That thing. It's like it's beyond motivation. It's beyond inspiration. It's beyond discipline. It's like something pulling you. Okay, you remember how you marked out, can that be replicated? And that's been one of your requests you've been looking for all this time, from 2018 to 2025. This video, this is the 2025 me. And I still honestly believe, yes, that can be replicated. That can be replicated in other people. But why would you want to do something like that? Why would you want to click an on switch on somebody that doesn't shut off? And I mean the kind of on switch, I mean, wouldn't that be 2030 me? Wouldn't that be a serious responsibility, knowing that you would have that kind of craziness to where you could switch an on switch on and it doesn't shut off and you can't shut it off? Or can you? I don't know. 2030 me. 2020, as I sit right here in 2025, I don't know. And at this point, I still don't know if it's all in my head or if it's actually real. Because we're dealing with subconscious function. Subconscious means it's below the conscious level. It is 2030 me. It's still the same animal. In 2030 me, I want to thank you so much, and I just want to congratulate you right now, right here, right now. Timothy Daniel Wilson of 2030. I want to congratulate you so much for what you've contributed to humanity and the way you have masterfully articulated in your writings with just a plain Jane piece of paper and pen, how you've created the systems, some methods, and the procedures to help people surmount post-traumatic stress disorders, emotional disorders, depression, abandonment issues. Those four psychological staples, the four corners that you think that is actually the four corners of all other toxifying sicknesses of the human psyche and heart. Thank you so much for continuing to press forward with that one mission and purpose. And thank you so much for the commander's intent that you wrote out for yourself to follow. That is just a small handful of words that you can give to your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. Thank you so much for doing that. I cannot thank you enough for that. 2030 me. And thank you for allowing yourself to have these off-the-wall crazy ideas without thinking you're crazy. And thank you so much for having these little snippets and pieces of paper that you knew for a fact were seeds that just need to be planted in the right folder so it could grow. Thank you so much for knowing that and sharing the importance of that to other people, to let them know that it's that little bitty seed that the spirit of the universe shares these little seeds with us, and they come as thoughts. And those thoughts aren't fully formed. That's why it's so important to have a pen and paper on you at all freaking times, every day, every night, always, period. And thank you so much that you still do that, 2030 me. Remember when you realized there was something supernatural to that? I think it was 2020 when you realized that it was real and it was not in your head. That is very real. It's the spirit of the universe that does that. It comes through our DNA, it comes through our body, it comes through our subconscious, and then it comes into our conscious mind. But those thoughts are so fragile. Those seeds, they're not formed. It's like a little puff of smoke, and it's like as soon as that puff's there and you know it's there, you need to write it down real quick because it dissipates. It comes apart because it still can't say 2030 me. Can you say dissipates? 2030 me. Did you finally get me those speech therapy things? So you can learn how to talk. You remember when you was a little kid, you couldn't even freaking talk and you had to go through speech therapy. You remember that? 2030 me. Did you finally surmount that underlying self-esteem issue to where you grew up and you got out of school and you hid from the world, that you didn't want anybody to know that you were put in those remedial classes? Well, what little kids would call the retarded classes or whatever. Did you finally get over that? 2030 me. Did you surmount that problem? God, I'd hope so. Because at 2025, it's still here right now at 2025 in me. I still have that kind of like that underlying self-esteem issue or self-worth issue or whatever. It's like that's something I just want to hide from the world. I don't want the world to see that. I just want all that to me die and just be alive as according to like about 2018 up to 2025. And then, of course, as I'm talking to you, 2030 me. Can't we just do a racy do-overs? Yeah, we can rewrite the past. We can rewrite the past by putting it in a different context and assigning new meaning and purpose to it. Because 2030 me, at this point, you know damn well, the power play is, in fact, the ability to make everything useful in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter how bad it is, whatever it was. And you know this is fact. I mean, even fertilizer at the right context and the right timing is just so valuable. We got plenty of that in life, but it just manifests in certain ways, and we don't see it that way because most of us are not farmers, nor do we know about seeds. We just know about the end product. But anyways, 2030 me, my God, I just sit here and I just wonder, what is artificial intelligence in 2030? 2030 me. Do you remember when it hit you like a ton of bricks, when you realized even more so that you could find a way to live sober and make it relatively worthwhile? You remember that? You remember that? That was an actual day. That was an actual moment of clarity. Remember that when you was sitting there, you was drinking a beer, you was drunk by yourself, drinking Fireball whiskey every freaking day, smoking your own high quality weed, sitting there looking at your indoor plants, your hydroponic plants, and the plants you had going on. You remember that? You remember looking at the bonsai plants you had and what you was looking at and how it hit you about the root transplant thing, how you took those little bonsai pot plants that you made. Remember how you deliberately mess up the seedling stage, you deliberately mess up the germination stage, deliberately mess up the seedling stage, and you deliberately mess up the starter stage. And those three early stages of development, if you mess them up there, take them almost to where you kill them, not quite kill them, but you give them everything that they don't, you deprive them of everything they need, and they're stunted. Remember that? And you were making these cute little bonsai pot plant trees thingies for tabletops and everything, and then you got the idea of putting them roots on there. Those, what was it, the microhizzle or whatever stuff, you remember that? And you remember how they come out of being stunted and they didn't grow to their what they normally max would, but they were definitely headed in that direction. Remember that? And do you remember that revelation when it hit you that day? When you were sitting there drinking at the end of, what was it? It was at the end of 2022 in that last quarter. I think it was right there towards Christmas, and you were sitting there looking at them plants, and you were looking at that bonsai plants, and you were drunken shit, almost ready to pass out. And you remember grabbing that pen and paper right before you passed out. Do you remember writing that little psychological paper, that little theory, that little note to that what if people are that way too? What if our heart and mind is that way? Because you remember 2030 me, do you remember it was like the reason you went back to drinking so heavy and you got back into all the shit like that and decided that you was just going to have to finish off? The reason you did that because you thought once psychological facilities were damaged in a certain way in an early childhood, that person would be stuck that way for life until they die, period. And do you remember, it's like, you remember you got it in your head, you're like, well, shit, if it's going to be that way, I'm just going to be fucked up every day. You remember that? It was a conscious choice you made. And you was just going to try to grow good weed and just try to work and mind your own business and try to write something meaningful. It was still the same mission and purpose, but you remember that you thought you was going to have to stay drunk and high till you die? Remember that? And do you remember 2030 me? Do you remember that day? Do you remember that freaking day where you wrote that down, and it's like you wrote down the because you were taking notes. Remember how you was taking notes on all your plants and each plant and the strain and its phases of development and what messed up and stuff like that, nutrients. Remember the detailed notes you were keeping on that. Okay. You remember the notes you wrote about what if you could take those roots, that root stuff, and make a new medium and take that stunted plant and put that in there, and then bam. Remember that revelation? And that's where it all started. And what was it? It was 2 weeks later when you made a decision, when you started making phone calls and you started drawing out a plan and how to get back into AA, even though at that time you didn't have a vehicle. And you were definitely, 10 or 11 miles out from the closest meeting, and that was only a meeting that would happen like 1 or 2 times a week. And remember that, making all those phone calls, and it's like there was no one around that even went to that meeting except for one guy that was willing to drive from an entire opposite town to go 20 miles out of his way to take you to those meetings. You remember that guy? Pretty cool, huh? Anyways, 2030 me. Right now, 2030 me, you have 7 years, no, almost 8 years sobriety. 2030 me, I want to congratulate you and thank you so much for that. I freaking love you for that, man. I love you for that. Damn, you're awesome. Okay, 2030 me, it's set. I'm going to turn this video off. I'm going to forget about it. And then at the end of this year, when I've hit my goal of making 365 videos, because that was the goal on this YouTube thing, so I could learn me and learn my mannerisms, how I speak, how I talk, how I don't talk, and stuff like that, and just see what's dinging around in my head and how I'm processing things out and what I'm going through in life, just my own little perspective along with other people's perspective. I'm not going to look at this video until 2030. 2030, January 1st, 2030, I'm going to look at this video and I will watch it to the end. And as for now, I'm signing off. And as Dad always said, see you in the funny papers. Oh, one other thing. 2030 me, I want to thank you so much for developing a system that you could use on anybody and everybody to help pull out the legendary hero inside them, like Sam Walton used to do. Or at least I think that's what he was doing. I don't know. But anyways, thank you for developing that system, because at 2030, I'm pretty sure you've got that well articulated and a very simple system that is highly monetizable. And I'm sure you're making damn good money on it by now. And also the other system, the simplified and easy to do system to be able to handle money without being poisoned by it and becoming egotistical. That system, that simple layout there, that prescription for that. Thank you so much for having that fully well published and out there into the world, into the right hands, because Lord knows the world would be such a better place. You get that kind of information out to the people on the top, all that, it just trickles down, and it just makes the world a better place. It just really does. And I thank you so much, 2033 me, for doing that. Anyways, signing off. See you in the funny papers.